What if the biggest mistake in negotiation is trying to be reasonable too early? Never split the difference opens by attacking the comforting idea that a good deal is simply the midpoint between two positions. Chris Voss comes from hostage negotiation, where the midpoint can be absurd, even deadly. If one side wants a person released and the other side threatens harm, compromise is not wisdom. It is a failure to understand the problem. The book's central argument is that negotiation is first an emotional discovery process. Facts matter, price matters, logic matters, but people do not reveal the real facts while they feel cornered, ignored, rushed, or morally defeated. The negotiator's first job is not to win the argument. It is to slow the room down until the hidden map appears. Fear, pride, deadlines, decision-makers, constraints, hopes, and the quiet fact that nobody has said yet. The opening Harvard story makes that argument visible. Voss sits across from elite negotiation professors and receives a role-play threat involving his son and $1 million. The old model would ask for positions, interests, concessions, and rational traits. Voss does something different. He listens, uses his voice carefully, asks calibrated questions, and lets the other side feel in control while they do the work of solving his problem. Imagine that scene for a moment. A former FBI negotiator is facing Harvard experts, and the demand is $1 million. What would you expect him to do first? Argue about the amount, or ask how he is supposed to pay it? The result is the book's first reversal. The question does not surrender control. It transfers the burden of reality back to the other side. That reversal is why the title matters. Splitting the difference sounds fair only when both sides are talking about divisible value and both positions are honest anchors. But many negotiations are not like that. A salary, a car price, a hostage ransom, a client contract, a deadline, a family conflict, or a vendor dispute can contain bad anchors, fake urgency, emotional wounds, and unknown constraints. Meeting halfway can reward the person who started with a more extreme number. Worse, it can hide the real problem. The book asks the viewer to stop treating negotiation as a tug-of-war over a rope and start treating it as an investigation. The rope is only what everyone can see. The real negotiation is the ground underneath their feet. The new rules begin with listening as an active instrument. Voss is not recommending passive politeness. He is describing listening as a way to collect intelligence and shape emotion at the same time. In high-stakes crises, negotiators learned that people calm down when they feel heard accurately. Calm people reveal more. People who reveal more give you leverage. That is tactical empathy, not agreeing with the other side, not feeling their pain in a sentimental way, and not abandoning your goal, but demonstrating that you understand their world well enough for them to keep talking. This distinction is essential. Empathy in the book is not softness. It is how the negotiator gets close enough to reality to persuasion it. Chapter 2 turns that listening into a tool called mirroring. Mirroring is almost embarrassingly simple. Repeat the last few important words, usually with a curious upward tone, and let silence do its work. A mirror says, in effect, continue. It keeps the counterpart talking without forcing the negotiator to invent a clever speech. The Chase Manhattan bank robbery case gives the technique pressure and shape. In that crisis, Voss is not trying to sound brilliant. He is trying to keep people alive, slow the pace, and draw out useful details from men who are armed, frightened, and unstable. The mirror helps because it does not challenge the other person's dignity. It returns their words as an invitation. Mirroring works because most people want to correct, expand, or refine what they just said. A direct question can feel like interrogation. A counterargument can trigger defense. A mirror feels lighter. It is a small nudge that creates more language from the other side. You can notice this in ordinary life. If a client says, The timeline is impossible. A lecture about your team's capacity may harden the conflict. A mirror, impossible, can uncover whether the problem is budget, legal review, executive fear, or a previous vendor failure. The technique is small, but its purpose is large. It keeps the negotiator from assuming the problem too soon. Here is a practical prediction moment. Picture a buyer hearing, "This is our final price," from a seller. What would you expect to work better? Explaining why the price is unfair, or calmly mirroring the phrase "final price"? The actual result Voss wants you to understand is that the mirror often opens a path the argument would close. The seller may explain the policy, mention a manager, reveal a deadline, or expose a non-cash term. The mirror does not guarantee a discount. It increases information. In this book, information is not decoration. Information is leverage. The mirror also teaches a deeper discipline. Be comfortable with silence. Many people negotiate as if silence is failure. They fill the gap, weaken their own position, and answer questions the other side has not asked. Voss treats silence as working space. After a mirror, the counterpart often feels responsible for carrying the conversation forward. That responsibility matters because negotiation is not only about what people say, it is about who feels pressure to solve the next moment. A good mirror, followed by a calm pause, lets the counterpart step into that pressure without feeling attacked. Chapter 3 moves from words to emotions with labeling. The book's instruction is blunt. Do not deny emotion, label it. Traditional advice often says to separate people from the problem. Voss argues that in many real negotiations, people's emotions are part of the problem. Fear, humiliation, anger, guilt, and suspicion are not static noise around the deal. They're forces moving the deal. A label names the emotional force without accusing the person. It seems like you're worried this will make you look bad, or it sounds like the last vendor burned a lot of trust. The label says, "I see the pressure." It does not say, "You're wrong to feel it." The Harlem hallway case gives labeling its stakes. Armed fugitives are inside an apartment. Tactical teams are outside, and the obvious temptation is to command, threaten, or demand surrender. Voss describes a different move, naming the likely fear and pressure from outside the door. The label becomes a way to lower the intensity without pretending the danger is not real. When a counterpart hears their situation described accurately, they often feel less need to prove it. That is why labeling can create trust faster than reassurance. Reassurance asks the other person to believe you. A good label shows that you have understood them before asking for anything. Labeling has a companion tool, the accusation audit. Before the other side attacks you, name the worst things they may already think about you. This can feel backward. Why would you introduce negative ideas? The result, according to the book's logic, is that named fears lose some of their heat. If you say, "You may think we're trying to push you into a bad deal," the counterpart does not need to spend the next 10 minutes proving that suspicion. The label can make them say, "No, that is not exactly it," and now they are refining the real objection. Again, the method is not magic. It is disciplined, emotional intelligence in service of better information. This is where tactical empathy becomes ethically important. These tools can be used manipulatively if the negotiator treats the other person as a machine to be played. Voss's stronger lesson is different. The other side has a world, and deals fail when that world is ignored. A manager may not resist your proposal because the numbers are bad. She may resist because approving it makes her responsible if it fails. A supplier may not resist a deadline because they are lazy. They may be hiding a capacity problem. A spouse may not resist a plan because they dislike the plan. They may hear disrespect in the speed of the decision. Labeling protects you from solving the wrong problem with confidence. Chapter 4 attacks the worship of yes. Most sales scripts chase yes as if yes means commitment. Voss warns that yes can be counterfeit. People say yes to escape pressure, to end a conversation, to appear agreeable, or to delay conflict. No, by contrast, can make people feel protected. No gives the counterpart limits, autonomy, and control. The telemarketer example is simple because everyone knows the feeling. The caller asks harmless yes questions until you feel trapped. You may technically agree with each step, yet emotionally you're moving toward resistance. That is the lesson. A yes that is extracted under pressure may create less progress than a no that makes the person feel safe. No-oriented questions are one of the book's most useful everyday tools. Instead of asking, "Do you have a few minutes?" ask, "Is now a bad time?" Instead of asking, "Do you agree?" ask, "Would it be ridiculous to consider this?" The structure lets the counterpart answer no while still moving forward. It lowers the fear of being trapped. Imagine you need a busy executive to reopen a stalled discussion. What would you expect to get more honest engagement? Can we meet today? Or would it be a bad idea to revisit this before the deadline? The result is that the second question often feels safer because the person can reject it without feeling cornered, and that sense of control may keep the door open. The chapter also distinguishes three kinds of yes: counterfeit, confirmation, and commitment. A counterfeit yes is a polite escape. A confirmation yes merely acknowledges a fact. A commitment yes is the one that matters, but it usually comes later after the counterpart has felt heard and the real obstacles have surfaced. This is a major shift in the book's argument. The goal is not to collect agreeable sounds. The goal is to create a conversation in which agreement becomes real enough to survive implementation. If the yes disappears as soon as the call ends, it was never the deal. It was only a social reflex. Chapter 5 gives the book one of its most famous targets: the phrase, "That's right." Voss separates it from "you are right." When someone says, "You are right," they may only be ending the conversation or conceding that your argument sounds logical. When they say "that's right," they recognize their own situation in your summary. That is why the summary matters. You listen, mirror, label, and then summarize the counterpart's world so accurately that they feel the click of recognition. In the behavioral change stairway, this is the movement from active listening to empathy, rapport, persuasion, and eventually behavior change. The Jeffrey Schilling kidnapping case gives this idea a long arc. The point is not that a single phrase solves a hostage crisis. The point is that persuasion arrives after the other side feels accurately understood. A summary that earns "that's right" does not flatten the counterpart's view into your preferred story. It gives their view back to them with enough precision that they can relax their guard. Only then can the negotiation move. If yes is sometimes a surface answer, "that's right" is deeper because it signals recognition. The person is not merely agreeing with you. They're hearing themselves clarified. For a viewer, this changes how preparation works. Before a hard meeting, do not only prepare your pitch. Prepare the other side's speech. What are they afraid of? What they say is unfair. What history are they carrying? What pressure do they face from people not in the room? If your summary ignores those pressures, your solution may sound naive even if it is technically strong. If your summary captures them, you may earn permission to persuade. The bridge from listening to persuasion is not cleverness. It is accuracy. But the next chapter shows that accuracy alone is not enough, because perception of value can still be bent. Chapter 6 is about bending reality, and it may be the chapter most people recognize from everyday bargaining. Voss discusses deadlines, anchors, fairness, loss aversion, and the emotional shape of numbers. The Haiti kidnapping case shows why price is not only arithmetic. A ransom demand begins as a frightening number, but the negotiation changes when time, family fear, criminal incentives, and practical payment limits become part of the frame. The lesson is not that every number is fake. The lesson is that every number sits inside a story about urgency, fairness, risk, and loss. Change the story, and the number may change with it. Fairness is especially powerful because it feels moral. When someone says, "I just want what is fair," they may be inviting cooperation, but they may also be applying pressure. The word can make the other person defend themselves before the actual terms are examined. Voss wants negotiators to notice fairness language and ask what standard is being used. Fair compared to what? Fair for whom? Fair under which constraints? In a workplace, a vendor negotiation, or a family decision, the word fair can hide assumptions. The negotiator's job is to bring those assumptions into the open without sounding offended by the word itself. The book also uses loss aversion. People often feel losses more sharply than equivalent gains. That means the fear of losing a deal, status, time, safety, or identity can move behavior faster than the hope of gaining something. Picture a seller who has held a price high for weeks. What would you expect to matter more at the end of the month? Your logical explanation of market value, or the possibility that the deal disappears today? The actual answer depends on the seller's hidden pressures. But Voss's point is that deadlines and potential losses can reshape the emotional field. Good negotiators do not worship deadlines. They investigate what the deadline means. Anchoring appears here as well. A strong first number can pull the conversation toward itself, even when everyone knows it is strategic. Voss does not reduce bargaining to anchoring alone, but he treats numbers as emotional events. A number can shock, insult, relieve, or focus. This is why tone and empathy still matter during price talk. If a number lands as disrespect, the counterpart may fight to restore dignity. If it lands as difficult but understandable, the conversation can continue. The phrase, "How am I supposed to do that?" works because it turns a number into a problem the other side must help solve. It is polite, but it is not weak. Chapter 7 develops that move into calibrated questions. These are open-ended how and what questions that make the counterpart think, explain, and participate. They create what Voss calls the illusion of control. The phrase can sound manipulative, but the practical idea is that people cooperate better when they do not feel dominated. A calibrated question avoids direct confrontation while still shaping the conversation. How can we solve this? What makes this difficult? How am I supposed to move forward if the approval is not yours? The question gives the other side room to speak, but it also defines the problem they must now address. The Dos Palmas failure gives this chapter gravity. Voss does not present negotiation as a clean sequence of tricks that always works. He describes a painful failure involving hostages, competing agencies, violence, and a negotiation environment damaged by confrontation and confusion. That failure matters because it shows why control is often an illusion on both sides. In complex negotiations, nobody controls everything. The better question is who can create enough collaboration for the next useful move. Calibrated questions are built for that reality. They do not force obedience. They invite the counterpart to help design the path. There's also a warning here. Why questions can sound accusatory. Why did you do that? Maybe a sincere request for explanation, but it often lands as blame. How and what questions are safer because they focus on process and conditions? What's the biggest obstacle? How would this need to work for your team? What happens if nothing changes? These questions are not vague. They pull out implementation details, hidden authorities, and constraints. A negotiator who asks them well can discover whether the person across the table can actually deliver the deal they are discussing. Chapter 8 moves from agreement to execution. This is where many negotiations fail. People celebrate the yes and ignore whether the plan can survive reality. Voss wants the viewer to hear yes as the beginning of a verification process, not the end. The prison siege story shows how execution can collapse when one small operational detail is not respected. The surrender plan depended on a walkie-talkie message proving that the first inmate was safe. When someone outside the plan confiscated the walkie-talkie, the logic of the agreement broke. The lesson is precise. If the implementation path is not protected, the agreement is fragile. Execution requires attention to who is really involved. The person saying yes may not be the final decision maker. They may be an advocate, a messenger, a blocker, or someone who likes the idea but cannot authorize it. Voss pushes negotiators to ask questions that reveal the decision chain. How does your team usually approve something like this? What will your boss care about most? How will we know if the legal group is comfortable? These questions may feel less exciting than price moves, but they decide whether the deal becomes real. A promise that cannot travel through the organization is only a pleasant conversation. The chapter also uses the 7-38-55 idea to remind negotiators that words are not the whole message. Tone and body language can contradict verbal agreement. Voss does not want readers to treat those percentages as a simplistic formula for all communication. The useful point is that negotiators must listen beyond the literal yes. Hesitation, mismatch, vagueness, and overeagerness can all be signals. Here is another prediction moment. Imagine someone says, "Yes, we can probably make that work," while their tone goes flat and their next steps stay vague. What would you expect Voss to trust? The word yes or the implementation signals around it? The result is clear. He trusts the signals enough to keep asking how the plan will actually happen. Chapter 9 turns to hard bargaining without abandoning empathy. The Toyota 4Runner story makes the method concrete. Voss wants a specific vehicle, knows he is emotionally attached, and still tries to bargain with discipline. He uses a low but reasoned offer, a respectful tone, calibrated questions, and silence. The point is not that everyone can force a seller to accept their number. The point is that bargaining hard does not require becoming hostile. You can be warm in tone and firm in substance. In fact, warmth can make firmness more sustainable because the counterpart does not have to spend all their energy defending their pride. The Ackerman model gives the chapter a structure. Set a target price, begin with a strong anchor below it, move in planned increments, use empathy and calibrated questions, and make the final number precise enough to feel considered. The model matters because many people bargain emotionally and then call the result intuition. They start too high, move too quickly, or negotiate against themselves. Voss's structure slows that down. If your target is clear before the conversation, every concession can have a purpose. If your target is vague, the other side's pressure becomes your plan. Bargaining hard also includes non-cash terms. A deal is not always only price. Delivery, risk, support, timing, referrals, exclusivity, payment schedule, scope, and future options can all create value. This is where the book's earlier listening tools return. If you have not listened, you may not know which non-cash term matters. If you have not labeled fear, you may not know what risk needs protection. If you have not asked calibrated questions, you may not know what constraint is movable. Hard bargaining without discovery becomes arm wrestling. Hard bargaining after discovery becomes design. Chapter 10 introduces black swans, the unknown unknowns that can transform a negotiation. The phrase points to information that seems impossible or irrelevant until it appears and changes everything. In the book's crisis examples, a hidden religious belief, a private relationship, a secret deadline, or an unseen decision maker can completely reshape the situation. The black swan idea is not a mystical claim. It is a discipline of humility. You do not know the whole map. The other side may not know the whole map either. Therefore, the negotiator keeps listening for anomalies, odd phrases, emotional spikes, and facts that do not fit the official story. The William Griffin Banks siege story gives this idea a tragic frame. The negotiators faced a violent situation, but an important hidden driver was missed: Griffin's religious framing and what that meant for his behavior. The point for ordinary viewers is not to compare a business meeting to a shooting. It is to understand the danger of assuming that the visible demand is the real demand. A person may ask for price, but need respect. They may demand speed, but fear blame. They may resist your proposal because of someone absent from the room. Black swans live in that gap between the stated issue and the real driver. A useful prediction moment sits inside this chapter. Suppose a negotiation has stalled for weeks, and the visible issue is budget. What would you expect to solve it? Another discount, or discovering that your contact is no longer the real decision maker? The actual result in Voss's business example is that direct human interaction exposes the hidden structure. The contact admits he is not the right person. The deal moves to someone else, and the process eventually advances. The black swan was not a secret number. It was the real authority path. This is why Voss prefers face-to-face interaction when stakes are high. Email can preserve words, but it hides tone, timing, discomfort, and unguarded moments. A person can edit themselves back into position. In person, or at least in richer conversation, the negotiator can notice what lands, what produces energy, and what the counterpart voids. Black swans often appear as small disturbances before they appear as facts. A strange hesitation, an unnecessary detail, a sudden change in emotion, or a repeated phrase can be the edge of the hidden map. The negotiator's task is to stay curious without becoming paranoid. The appendix turns the book into preparation. A negotiation one-sheet forces the viewer to write the goal, summarize the facts, list labels, prepare accusation audits, design calibrated questions, and think through non-cash offers. This is one of the most practical parts of the book because it prevents the common mistake of preparing only arguments. Arguments are only one layer. The one sheet prepares emotional reality, possible objections, implementation, and discovery. It asks the negotiator to enter the conversation with hypotheses, not fantasies. A hypothesis can be tested. A fantasy only gets disappointed. The complete movement of the book is now visible. Mirroring opens language. Labeling lowers emotional heat. No creates safety. That's right earns recognition. Fairness, deadlines, anchors, and loss of version shape perceived value. Calibrated questions make the other side help solve the problem. Execution questions test whether yes is real. Bargaining structure prevents emotional concessions. Black swan curiosity keeps the negotiator humble enough to find the fact that changes the deal. None of these tools stand alone. If you mirror without labeling, you may collect words without understanding emotion. If you label without calibrated questions, you may create rapport without movement. If you bargain without black swan curiosity, you may win the wrong negotiation. Voss also spends time on voice because the same words can either calm a room or sharpen resistance. The late-night FM DJ voice, as he frames it, is not a performance gimmick. It is a deliberate pace and tone that signals control, warmth, and steadiness. In a crisis, a rushing voice tells the other side that panic is contagious. In a business negotiation, a rushed tone tells the other side that you may be desperate. A calm voice does not mean you're casual about the outcome. It means you're not letting the other side's urgency decide your nervous system. That matters because emotion travels faster than logic. Before the words persuade, the room has already judged the signal. There is a second voice lesson. Upward curiosity can invite information, while downward certainty can close it. A mirror often works best when it sounds gently curious. A boundary often works best when it sounds calm and final. The source does not ask the viewer to become theatrical. It asks the viewer to match voice to purpose. If the purpose is discovery, let the voice open space. If the purpose is a boundary, remove the needy edge. This is why tone belongs in a full summary of the book. Voss is not only teaching sentences. He is teaching the delivery system that decides whether those sentences feel respectful, weak, pushy, or trustworthy. The book's method also depends on patience with partial information. Many people hear a tactic and want an immediate result. They mirror once and expect a confession. They label once and expect trust. They ask one calibrated question and expect the counterpart to solve the deal. Voss's cases show a slower truth. These tools are cumulative. A mirror may produce a detail. A label may lower heat. A no-oriented question may reopen a door. A summary may earn recognition. A calibrated question may reveal a constraint. Each move makes the next move better. The negotiation changes because the map improves, not because one magic phrase defeats the other person. That cumulative logic is why accusations audits deserve more attention. An accusation audit is not self-insult. It is preemptive clarity. If the other side may think you are late, expensive, arrogant, inexperienced, or trying to trap them, those suspicions already exist in the room. Leaving them unnamed does not make them disappear. Naming them carefully can make the counterpart feel safer correcting you. It also shows that you are not afraid of the uncomfortable part of the conversation. In practical terms, this can change the opening of a meeting. Instead of beginning with your strongest claim, you may begin by acknowledging the reasons the other side may doubt you. Imagine a consultant entering a renewal meeting after a project ran over budget. What would you expect to happen if she begins with a polished success story and avoids the overrun? The actual result is usually suspicion. The client listens through the filter of the unspoken problem. If she begins by saying that the client may feel the team was expensive, slow to surface risks, and too optimistic at the start, the room changes. The client can still be upset, but now the hidden accusation is no longer doing all the work in silence. This is the accusation audit's value. It turns invisible resistance into discussable material. The same idea applies to labels. A weak label flatters or guesses. A strong label names a pressure that the other side recognizes. There's a difference between saying, "I understand," and saying, "It seems like approving this could put your reputation on the line if the rollout fails." The second statement is more useful because it gives the counterpart a concrete place to correct, refine, or confirm. The viewer should notice that Voss's method is not about sounding emotionally sophisticated. It is about being specific enough that the other person can reveal the next layer of truth. Specificity also protects against fake empathy. Fake empathy uses warm words to hurry someone toward your preferred outcome. Tactical empathy, properly used, slows down enough to let the other person's actual constraints appear. If the other side says the price is impossible, tactical empathy does not immediately translate that into they want a discount. It asks what impossible means. Budget cycle? Procurement rule? Personal embarrassment? Cash timing? Competing quote? Internal politics? Each possibility creates a different negotiation. The word impossible is only the label on a closed door. The negotiator still has to find out which room is behind it. The book is especially useful because it repeatedly separates surface demands from hidden needs. A ransom demand may not equal the kidnapper's true minimum. A seller's final price may not equal the seller's actual constraint. A manager's no may not mean dislike. A prospect's silence may not mean disinterest. It may mean uncertainty, missing authority, fear of embarrassment, or a lack of urgency. The viewer should learn to treat every firm statement as information, not as the end of thinking. Sometimes the statement is real. Sometimes it is a shield. Sometimes it is an opening anchor. The only way to know is to keep the conversation alive without surrendering your own limits. Calibrated questions become powerful in that environment because they are both respectful and difficult to ignore. A good how question can make the counterpart confront the practical consequences of their own demand. If they demand a price you cannot pay, how am I supposed to do that? Forces them to consider implementation. If they demand a deadline your team cannot meet, what should we remove from scope to make that date real? Turns pressure into design. The question is not a complaint. It is an invitation to solve the reality they have created. That is why calibrated questions can be firm while sounding collaborative. There is a danger, however, in overusing any phrase until it becomes a trick. If every hard moment receives the same, how am I supposed to do that? The counterpart may hear technique instead of sincerity. The deeper lesson is not the exact sentence. It is the stance behind the sentence. Make the other side participate in reality. Sometimes that stance sounds like a how question. Sometimes it sounds like a label. Sometimes it sounds like a silence after a mirror. Sometimes it sounds like a direct boundary. The viewer should collect the principles, not merely memorize the lines. The execution chapter also deserves a modern workplace translation. Many projects fail after enthusiastic meetings because nobody tested the path from interest to action. Who signs? Who reviews security? Who owns budget? Who can quietly block the decision? What happens if legal changes one clause? What must be true for the implementation team to support the promise made by the sales team? Voss's point is that a negotiator must hear the machinery behind agreement. The yes is only meaningful if the machine can carry it. A deal that sounds good in the conference room can collapse in the hallway. This is why he values questions that expose the process. How will this be rolled out is not administrative filler. What will happen after we agree is not a weak question. These questions reveal whether the counterpart has imagined the future beyond the handshake. They also reveal whether the person across from you is protecting themselves with vagueness. If they cannot describe the next steps, the negotiation is not ready to celebrate. The viewer can use this immediately. After any important yes, ask what happens next, who else needs to be comfortable, and what could prevent the agreement from working. Hard bargaining then becomes less mysterious. If you have discovered the real process, understood the pressures, labeled the fears, and tested implementation, your price conversation is more informed. You know where value lives. You know which terms are flexible. You know which constraints are theater and which constraints are structural. The Ackerman model gives the price movement discipline, but discovery gives that discipline intelligence. Without discovery, a model can become mechanical. With discovery, it becomes a way to protect your target while still respecting the other side's reality. Imagine a freelancer negotiating a fee after learning that the client has a fixed cash budget, but high urgency and a need for executive confidence. What would you expect to work better? Cutting the fee immediately or holding price while changing scope, schedule, and risk protection? The result the book prepares us to see is that non-cash variables may solve what a discount cannot. A shorter first phase, clearer reporting, faster executive check-ins, or a success bonus may fit the real constraint better than a simple concession. The negotiation expands when the negotiator stops staring only at price. Black swans also have categories. Some are negative, a hidden blocker, a secret deadline, an authority problem, a personal fear, a past betrayal. Some are positive, an unused budget, a non-cash asset, a shared mission, a personal ambition, a timing advantage. Some are neutral but decisive. The person at the table is not the person who matters, or the stated objection is only a proxy for another concern. Voss wants negotiators to search for these facts with humility. The most valuable sentence in the conversation may sound casual when it first appears. The negotiator's skill is noticing that it does not fit the old map. The search for black swans also explains why rapport is not decorative. People rarely reveal sensitive hidden facts to someone who makes them feel stupid, cornered, or used. They reveal more when the conversation feels safe enough and serious enough. This is why the book's early tools return at the end. Mirroring, labeling, no-oriented questions, and calibrated questions are not separate chapters in real life. They are the conditions that make black swans more likely to surface. If the other side feels they can say no, correct you, and save face, they may tell you the thing that changes everything. The one-sheet appendix can be turned into a simple practice ritual. First, write your optimistic goal and your walk-away line. Second, write the other side's world in their language, not yours. Third, list accusations they may hold against you. Fourth, prepare labels for fear, pressure, unfairness, and risk. Fifth, prepare no-oriented and calibrated questions. Sixth, list non-cash terms. Seventh, write what implementation would have to look like for the agreement to be real. This exercise forces the viewer to prepare for discovery, emotion, value, and execution together. It is the book in miniature. A final workplace example can tie the system together. Suppose your team wants a raise, a vendor concession, a delayed launch, or a disputed invoice resolved. The weak approach is to collect arguments and wait for your turn to speak. The stronger approach is to enter with labels, mirrors, calibrated questions, and a clear target. You might label pressure. It seems like the budget conversation is already politically sensitive. You might mirror a key phrase. You might ask, how would this need to be structured for you to defend it internally? You might test implementation before celebrating. The conversation becomes less about pushing and more about uncovering the route. The personal life translation is just as important. Negotiation is not only money. It is who takes responsibility, how decisions are made, when resentment is named, and what agreement means after the conversation ends. In a family conflict, splitting the difference may look mature while leaving the real wound untouched. A label may reveal that the issue is not the calendar, but feeling unconsidered. A calibrated question may turn blame into design. How can we make this work without either person feeling trapped? The book's tools are strongest when they help people say what the surface argument has been hiding. By the end, the viewer should feel the book's progression as one coherent discipline. Start by calming the room, then gather language, then name emotion, then make no safe, then summarize until recognition appears, then shape the value frame, then ask questions that make the counterpart solve reality, then verify execution, then bargain with structure, then keep looking for hidden facts, then prepare the next conversation with a one sheet. This is not a bag of tricks. It is a sequence for moving from noise to truth and from truth to workable action. There's a moral caution running through the book. These methods can be abused. A person can mirror, label, and ask calibrated questions while secretly trying to trap someone. That is why the viewer should measure the method by whether it increases truth or hides it. Tactical empathy should make the other person's world more visible, not less. A calibrated question should clarify constraints, not manufacture helplessness. A hard bargain should test value, not humiliate. The best version of the book is not a manual for domination. It is a manual for refusing lazy assumptions. You do not split the difference because you have done the harder work of discovering what the difference is really about. The final lesson returns to the opening question. The biggest mistake in negotiation is trying to be reasonable before you understand reality. Reasonableness without discovery becomes compromise theater. It feels mature, but it may only average 2 guesses. Voss's full message is more demanding. Slow down, listen for emotion, make no safe, summarize until recognition appears, Ask how and what. Test implementation. Bargain with structure, and keep searching for the hidden fact. The practical takeaway is simple enough to use today. Before your next hard conversation, write 3 labels, 3 calibrated questions, 1 accusation audit, and 1 sentence that names what a real agreement would have to execute. The memorable final line is this: never split the difference until you know what difference you're splitting.